It's really interesting, some of the most powerful truths, the things that really make you think, often sound like, well, contradictions. Like, how can yielding make you whole? How can bending actually straighten you out? And emptiness. How can that possibly lead to fullness?
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? It makes you wonder what's really going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into in this deep dive.
I'm excited to unpack this.
Me too. So the source for this deep dive is chapter 22, Divine Wholeness. It's from the Built for Greatness, Built for God, that's BFG movement. They have this really interesting Christian take on the Tao Te Ching, and it's got me thinking.
Oh yeah, the BFG Handbook, right. I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's pretty unique. Their whole mission with this book is to present the gospel in a fresh way, like a new expression of God's love. And they say it's all about restoring the truth.
Interesting. So where do we even start with something like that?
Well, in this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack these honestly kind of head-scratching ideas of yielding, bending, and emptiness. And we're going to see if we can figure out how they might actually lead to, a sense of divine wholeness in your life.
It's almost like they're showing us a different way to be strong and fulfilled.
Right. And we'll also explore how these concepts line up with fundamental Christian teaching. They even weave in scripture right into the chapter itself, which I think is really cool.
Nice. Weaving it all together.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just dive right in with that first one, the one that really gets me. Remain yielding to become whole. Where's the power in that? What do you think?
At first glance, yielding sounds kind of weak, doesn't it? Like giving up, surrendering.
Right, that's what I thought too.
But what this chapter is suggesting, and it's something that really resonates with the whole Christian worldview, is that true wholeness, true strength even, comes through humility. It's about surrendering our own will, our own plans, to God's greater purpose.
Like letting go of the wheel, trusting someone else is navigating.
Exactly. It's recognizing that our way, our human way, isn't always the best way. And sometimes there's incredible strength in letting go of that need to control everything.
It reminds me of that passage in Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11 about Jesus. His whole life was an act of yielding, of humbling himself, even to the point of death on the cross.
Oh, absolutely. That's the ultimate example, isn't it?
Yeah, and the chapter even makes that connection, saying by yielding, he embodied the fullness of God's plan for salvation, showing that through surrender and humility, one can experience God's power and presence. So it's not passive at all, is it? It's like actively embracing something much, much bigger than ourselves.
You're choosing to be part of something bigger. It changes your whole perspective.
Right. And the BFG framework tackles this through they call renewal. And the first step is renewal mindset. So what kind of shift do we need to make in our thinking to really, truly yield in our everyday lives?
It comes down to choosing humility over pride, which is honestly pretty countercultural these days.
Yeah, right. We're constantly bombarded with messages about being assertive and promoting ourselves.
Exactly. So to actually live this out, it takes a conscious decision, a real internal shift. Because true strength isn't always about pushing our own agenda. Sometimes it's about recognizing our dependence on God. Like in James chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up."
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's a mindset of trust, believing that yielding doesn't mean losing. It means potentially gaining something far greater than we could achieve on our own.
So much greater, yeah. So practically speaking, what does that look like? How do we actually put this into action?
Well, think about those moments when you feel that resistance, that urge to force things to go your way. That's when you need to pause. Take a breath, offer a prayer, ask God for guidance.
It's about letting go of the reins, trusting that we're not alone in this.
Yeah. And then the next part of renewal is renewal aim. It's about setting our intention. So what's the goal when we choose to yield?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, the BFG Handbook really stresses that the aim here is to actively identify and dismantle pride within ourselves. It's about recognizing those subtle ways we try to elevate ourselves or insist that our understanding is the only right one.
It can be so subtle.
It really can. And James 4.2 comes into play again here. We need to consciously lower ourselves before God. So think about it in your conversations, for example. Instead of immediately jumping in with your opinion, try yielding the floor first. Really listen to the other person. Try to understand their perspective. Then, and only then, formulate your response. That That right there is a powerful way to practice yielding.
That is a really good point. It's just that simple act of pausing and listening can make a world of difference.
It really can. It's a small act with a huge impact.
Okay, so what about renewal practice? How do we actually turn this yielding into a habit, a way of life?
That's where the daily surrender comes in. You have to surrender your personal plans, your desires, to what you believe is God's will. And it's not a one-time thing, it's a constant realignment. James 4.7 says, "Submit yourselves then to God." So think about the big decisions you're facing right now. Before you lock into a path based solely on your own preferences, take the time to really seek God's input.
Through prayer.
Yeah, prayer, scripture, wise counsel.
It's about staying connected and in conversation, not assuming we've got it all figured out.
Absolutely.
The chapter also looks at other religious traditions and their perspectives on yielding. It's under the respond section. What can we learn from those other perspectives?
It's really fascinating. This theme of humility and surrender, it pops up all over the place. The Handbook mentions Buddhism, for example. They emphasize letting go of the ego.
It's about detaching from our own self-importance.
Right. And in Islam, submission to God is at the core of the faith. And Hinduism talks about surrendering to Dharma, which is like divine order. So all these different paths, they converge on this idea that there's a reality bigger than ourselves, and wisdom lies in aligning with it. And it ties back perfectly with what Jesus says in Matthew 23:12. "For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted."
It's not just a Christian idea, is it? It seems to be a universal truth.
It really does.
Okay, so let's move on to that second paradox. Remain bending to become straight. What's that all about?
Okay, so this one is about the journey, about how we become righteous. And what it suggests is that the path isn't always this rigid, straight line. Sometimes it involves being flexible, adaptable. It might even mean experiencing setbacks that ultimately guide us in the right direction.
So it's more like a winding road with some unexpected turns.
Exactly. It's realizing that growth often comes through recognizing our imperfections, being willing to be shaped and molded.
And it makes me think of Proverbs 3.1112, which talks about God's discipline being a sign of his love.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It might not always feel good in the moment, but it's for our ultimate benefit.
Absolutely. So in the renewal framework, what kind of mindset do we need to embrace this bending?
Humility, again. But this time, it's coupled with a genuine willingness to learn and be corrected. We need to be vulnerable enough to admit when we're wrong and open to new perspectives.
But isn't that really tough in a world that often rewards unwavering certainty?
It is, and it's why Proverbs 3.1112 is so important. That reminder that this correction, this bending, it's coming from a place of love. So think about it. The next time you receive criticism, resist that urge to immediately defend yourself. Instead, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, is there any truth in this? Could this help me grow?
Oh, that is so hard to do. It feels so counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
So what about renewal aim? What should be our intention when it comes to bending?
Here, it's all about seeking God's perspective, especially when we're challenged, when our own understanding feels threatened. Proverbs 3.11-12 comes in again. "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in." We need to pause in those moments of disagreement or questioning and ask ourselves, what is God trying to show me through this situation or even through this person? Maybe there's a valuable insight we're missing.
It's almost like a perspective shift, isn't it? Moving from a defensive posture to a learning posture.
Exactly.
But how do we make this bending a renewal practice?
It's about being open to God's direction in your life, continuously. It's about trusting that his path for you might involve some unexpected twists and turns. Proverbs 3.5-6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." That's what we're talking about. So let's say you're in a conflict. This practice of bending might mean being willing to compromise, to try and see the other person's side, to find a solution that honors God rather than just getting your own way.
It's about being flexible, but God-centered.
Exactly.
Do the other faith traditions have anything to say about this idea of bending?
While the metaphors might be different, the underlying principle of being open to growth, not clinging to our current understanding, that definitely seems to be a common thread across different spiritual journeys.
It makes sense. We're all on a path of learning and evolving.
That's right.
All right, let's tackle that third paradox. Remain empty to become filled. This one really challenges the way we think, especially in a society that's all about achievement and constantly striving for more.
Oh, yeah, this one's a big one. especially nowadays.
What do you think?
Well, what this concept is saying is that by letting go, by intentionally releasing our attachment to stuff, to our egos, to that constant need for stimulation, we actually create a space where God can fill us with his spirit, with peace, with wisdom.
So it's about recognizing that true fulfillment isn't about getting more, but about letting go.
Exactly. It's counterintuitive, but that's where the real abundance lies.
What kind of mindset do we need to embrace this emptiness then? What does renewal mindset tell us?
It's all about decluttering, and not just physically, it's about decluttering our minds and our spirits.
Clearing out the noise so we can hear God's voice more clearly.
That's it. We need to recognize the things that distract us from God, the things that pull us away, and consciously choose to prioritize his presence instead.
But what's the key verse here?
It's Matthew 5.3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah, it's a good one to reflect on. And, a really practical way to cultivate this mindset is to start your day with quiet time, put aside your to-do list, and just be present with God. Let him speak into your day.
That intentional quiet time, it sounds so important, but so easy to neglect.
Oh, I know, we're all busy. But carving out that time, that space, it makes all the difference.
Okay, so what about renewal aim? What are we aiming for when we empty ourselves?
It's about making room for God. It's about intentionally creating that space in our lives where he can dwell. We need to empty ourselves of the things that crowd him out, our worries, anxieties, our obsession with material things.
It's like we're making space for God to move in our lives.
And Matthew 5.3 is central here again. Think about those times when you feel overwhelmed, scattered. That's when you need to intentionally take a few moments to just release those anxieties, to consciously put your trust in God. Create that little pocket of emptiness where his peace can flow in.
So it's not just a passive thing, it's an active choice.
It is. It's an intentional act of surrender.
All right, then how do we make this a consistent practice? How do we weave this emptying into our daily lives?
Well, it takes discipline, for sure. It's about consciously letting go of the distractions, the selfish desires, the things that are hindering our spiritual growth.
The things that keep us from truly connecting with God.
Exactly. Matthew 11.28-30, that's where Jesus invites the weary and burdened to find rest in him. And it really speaks to this. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We need to create those opportunities to empty ourselves, to be receptive to God. Maybe it's setting aside time for prayer and reflection each morning before you dive into the busyness of the day. Whatever works for you, but make it regular, intentional.
It's making time for silence and solitude, isn't it?
It is. It's a practice, and it's worth it.
It sounds like it. Okay, so we've talked about yielding, bending. What do the other faith traditions have to say about this idea of emptiness?
Once again, we see some really interesting parallels. So Buddhism, for example, they have the concept of emptiness or shunyata. It's a little complex, but it basically points to the interconnectedness of all things and the idea that nothing truly exists independently.
We're all connected, part of a greater whole.
Yes. And Islam emphasizes tazkiyah, which is about purifying the heart. It involves emptying yourself of negative qualities so that you can be filled with divine light.
That resonates with the Christian idea of becoming more Christ-like, doesn't it?
It really does. And in Hinduism, practices like meditation are all about quieting the mind, emptying it of all that constant chatter so you can connect with a deeper reality. So the common thread here is that detachment, letting go, is seen as a key to deeper spiritual connection and fulfillment.
It's amazing how these core principles keep popping up in different traditions, all pointing us in the same direction.
It's like they're all different paths leading up the same mountain.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's move on. The chapter then shifts gears a bit to talk about divine reversal and humility. And it starts with the promise, the weary will be renewed.
It's a beautiful promise, and it speaks directly to what we find in the Gospels, like in Matthew 11.28-30, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And also in Isaiah 40.3:1. "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Well, it's a reminder that we don't have to rely solely on our own strength. We can tap into a deeper well.
We can draw on God's strength.
Exactly.
So in the context of renewal, what does it mean to trust God for this renewal?
Well, it starts with recognizing that we need him. It's acknowledging our limitations and intentionally turning to Him for strength when we feel depleted, rather than just trying to power through on our own. Isaiah 40.31 is a good one to remember here. And practically speaking, it means pausing when you feel that weariness setting in and making a conscious choice to turn to God. Pray, seek His rest, ask for His strength. Don't just keep pushing.
It's about being aware of our need for Him.
Yeah, and trusting that He'll meet that need.
And what's our aim when we're feeling weary? What's the renewal aim?
It's about seeking that spiritual replenishment. We need to intentionally draw near to God, especially in those moments of exhaustion. We need to recognize our vulnerability and see Him as the source of our restoration. And again, Isaiah 40.31 is a great reminder. So when you're feeling drained, make the effort to spend time in prayer, read scripture. These are direct pathways to experiencing God's renewing power.
So it's not just about resting physically, it's about actively seeking spiritual restoration.
That's exactly right.
And how do we turn this into a renewal practice? How do we actually live this out?
It's about making those things, rest, prayer, connection with God, regular parts of your life, build them into your routine. It doesn't have to be complicated, just consistent. Schedule time for reflection and prayer, whether it's daily or weekly. The point is to intentionally connect with God, to allow Him to refresh your spirit.
To build it into our rhythm of life.
Yeah, make it a non-negotiable.
Okay, the chapter goes on to say, the poor will receive, which echoes Luke 6.20, blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Another reminder of that idea of reversal, of things not being what they seem. And then it says something that really made me pause. The abundance will be confused.
That's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it lines up with what Jesus says in Matthew 6.19 to 21, where He warns us against storing up treasures on earth, material wealth, and instead encourages us to focus on eternal spiritual wealth. It's like all that abundance, all those possessions, they can actually distract us from what truly matters.
They create a sort of spiritual clutter.
Exactly. And renewal mindset here, it emphasizes the importance of seeking spiritual wealth over material wealth.
So how do we shift our focus in a world that's constantly telling us to want more, to buy more, to achieve more?
It comes down to our values. We need to regularly examine what we're prioritizing. Are we focused on accumulating things, or are we investing in things that have lasting value? Matthew 6.1921 is a great guide. It says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
It's about realigning our heart with what truly matters.
Exactly.
So what's our aim here? What's renewal aim guiding us towards?
The aim is to prioritize eternal wealth over material gain. Let your spiritual values be your compass. Let them guide your decisions, how you spend your time, your money, your energy.
Letting those eternal considerations guide us, yeah. And what about the practice? How do we put this into action?
This is where we need to actively shift our focus from the material to the spiritual. Luke 12.15 is a good one to think about. It says, then He said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. A practical way to do this is to simplify your life. Use your resources, your time, your talents, your money to bless others, to serve God's purposes, rather than just accumulating more for yourself.
Living with a sense of purpose beyond just our own personal gain.
That's it.
Okay, so the chapter then talks about the Master's embrace of oneness, using John 17.2223, Jesus' prayer for unity among His followers, as an example. What's the renewal mindset when it comes to embracing this oneness?
It starts with actively seeking unity with God. Let His love and peace flow through you into your interactions with others. John 17.21 is the key verse here. That all of them may be one, Father. Just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us so that the world may believe that you have sent me. Try to be a reflection of God's love and peace in all your relationships, at home, at work, in your community. Be a vessel for that unity.
Being an ambassador of unity.
That's a good way to put it.
So what are we aiming for when it comes to this oneness? What's the renewal aim?
We're aiming to live in that constant state of connection with God, to let His will guide our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That's how we foster unity with Him and with others. John 17:21, that's our compass here. And practically speaking, it means seeking His peace in the midst of challenging situations, trusting in His presence and His guidance. Let Him lead you towards harmony.
It's about turning to Him as a source of unity.
Absolutely. He's the one who holds it all together.
And how do we make this a renewal practice? How do we cultivate this oneness in our everyday lives?
It all starts with our relationship with God. We need to nurture that connection through prayer, through worship, through obedience, just like Jesus did. John 17:21 inspires this practice. Make your decisions based on what you believe God wants for you. Seek his guidance before making those big choices. Live in conscious alignment with his purpose.
Living in alignment with God's purpose for our lives.
That's it.
And once again, respond highlights how other faiths view this idea of oneness. What stands out to you?
It's amazing how this theme just keeps showing up. The Handbook mentions Buddhism, which stresses interconnectedness, and Islam has Tawhid, which is the belief in the absolute oneness of God. And Hinduism talks about the Atman, the individual soul, being one with Brahman, the ultimate reality. So they all, in their own way, point to this idea of spiritual unity and the importance of living in harmony with God and with each other.
It's like this universal longing for connection.
It is. It's written on our hearts.
Okay, the chapter then moves into the way of the master, offering a series of really insightful statements. It starts with, because he does not exalt himself, he shines forth. And it references Matthew 23. What's the renewal mindset here? What are they getting at?
Humility. It's about humility. It's about consciously choosing to avoid any kind of self-promotion, any seeking of personal glory. 1 Peter 5:6 says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time."
Humble yourselves. It's a powerful reminder.
It is. And practically speaking, it means redirecting any praise or recognition you receive back to God. Acknowledge his role in your accomplishments.
Let him be the source of the light.
Yes, let him shine through us.
So what's our aim when it comes to avoiding self-exaltation? What's the renewal aim?
The aim is to live humbly, consistently. Don't seek recognition or praise. 1 Peter 5:6 guides us here. Make a conscious effort to give credit where credit is due. And when you are acknowledged, point back to God's grace.
Keep the focus on him.
That's it.
And what about the practice? How do we embody this in our actions?
We need to serve others humbly without expecting anything in return. Matthew 23:1 says, "The greatest among you will be your servant." So look for opportunities to help others quietly without needing to be seen or acknowledged.
Just doing it out of the goodness of our heart.
Exactly. Pure motives.
Okay, the next statement is, because he does not look to justify himself, he becomes distinguished. They're referencing Matthew 27:11-26, which is the account of Jesus before Pilate. It's a powerful example of not needing to defend yourself. And then we have, because he does not boast of himself, he gains merit, connecting to Matthew 6:1. What's the renewal mindset here?
It's about resisting the urge to brag about your achievements, your good deeds. Understand that true merit comes from God, not from people. Matthew 6:1 is key. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Focus on the impact you're having, on the well-being of others, not on seeking validation for yourself.
Keeping our motives pure. So what's the renewal aim when it comes to not boasting? What should be our goal?
The aim is to serve others without seeking any kind of self-promotion. Let Matthew 6:1 be your guide. Help others without needing to tell anyone about it. Find your reward in the act of service itself.
It's those quiet acts of kindness that really speak volumes.
They really do. They ripple out in ways we might not even see.
And what about the practice? How do we make this a habit?
It's about intentionally serving in a way that doesn't draw attention to yourself. Matthew 6:3 says, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Look for those opportunities to help discreetly, without seeking acknowledgement or praise. Let your actions speak for themselves.
Let God see and let that be enough.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, moving on. The next statement is, because he does not glorify himself, he endures. And they reference John 17:1 in the 9 and John 8:54-45, which are passages about Jesus seeking glory from the Father. And then finally, because he does not contend, he cannot be contended against. They connect this to Romans 12:18. What's the renewal mindset for living without contention?
This one is all about choosing peace over conflict. It's about trusting in God's protection rather than getting caught up in unnecessary arguments. Romans 12:18 says, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." So try to be a peacemaker. Seek understanding and reconciliation.
Choose harmony over being right.
Exactly.
And what's the renewal aim here? What should be our goal?
To live in peace consistently, to be free from those unnecessary arguments and conflicts. Trust that God is your defender. Consciously choose to de-escalate those tense situations. Respond with calmness and understanding, not defensiveness. Be a force for calm.
It's a much needed force in today's world. And the renewal practice. How do we make this a reality in our lives?
Actively avoid unnecessary conflict. Choose to respond to disagreements with peace and humility. Romans 12.18 is key. Really listen to and try to understand the other person's perspective. Don't just react or insist on your own point of view. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood.
That's such good advice for all of us. And what do the other faiths have to say about this idea of not contending?
Well, Buddhism emphasizes nonviolence and peaceful resolution. Islam places a high value on peace and reconciliation. And Hinduism teaches about acting without attachment to the outcome, which naturally reduces the need to argue or defend. So they all point to this universal wisdom of choosing peace over conflict.
It's like a global chorus singing the same song.
It is, and it echoes what Jesus taught us in Matthew 5.39. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also.
Okay, we're almost at the end of this chapter. It concludes with, become whole and you will return to harmony. They reference a lot of verses here. Psalm 37.724, Luke 3.46, Hebrews 13.5, and Matthew 11.2830. How does the renewal framework summarize the mindset for this return to harmony? What are we striving for?
We're striving for that inner wholeness that leads to peace, both within ourselves and in our relationships with God and others. 2 Corinthians 13.11 says, finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive for full restoration, encourage one another, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. That's our goal, and it's a beautiful one. So regularly examine your life, identify those areas of discord or brokenness, and actively seek reconciliation and healing. Make things right with God and with those around you.
It's that beautiful idea of wholeness leading to harmony. So as we wrap up this deep dive into chapter 22, I think the big takeaway for me is that true strength, real fulfillment, lasting peace, they're not always found in the ways the world tells us. It's not about pushing forward, holding on tightly, or accumulating more. This chapter shows us a different path, one that involves surrender, flexibility, and letting go so we can receive something much, much greater. And as we've explored, Jesus modeled these principles perfectly. So as you go about your day, think about these ideas: yielding, bending, emptying. Which one resonates with you the most right now? How can you bring one of these principles into your interactions, your decisions, your inner life?
It's really something to think about, isn't it? How can we embrace these seemingly passive actions, yielding, bending, emptying, and actually find a more powerful and authentic way to live? It's about strength in surrender, direction and flexibility, true abundance and letting go.
Beautifully put. And if you're intrigued by this, check out the BFG Handbook. It offers such a unique perspective on these timeless truths. And it's worth remembering what St. Thomas Aquinas said: truth cannot contradict truth. It suggests that the wisdom we've talked about today, even though we've been looking at it through a particular lens, it ultimately aligns with those deeper spiritual truths that are woven into the fabric of reality. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.